It's very nice to have you here in Stockholm.
Thank you.
Tenzin Tsundue. And could you tell us a little about yourself and your activities concerning Tibet?
Yes. So my name is Tenzin Tsundue. I'm a Tibetan refugee, born and brought up in India. I'm educated from India. I live in a place called Dharamshala in the northern part of India, in a state called Himachal Pradesh. And at the moment I'm on a speaking tour of Europe. Mainly I came here to speak at the Geneva Summit for Human Rights and Democracy. And after that I thought I should take advantage of the time and speaking in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Spain, Czech Republic, and on the 29th, by the end of this month, I'm going back to India.
So you're a refugee, you were born in Tibet and then you had to flee, or?
No, my parents came from Tibet when China invaded Tibet, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama had to leave Tibet and come to India. And I'm from the second generation, Tibetans who were born to that generation and born in India and educated in India. So my generation have never seen Tibet, but always heard of the stories of Tibet from their parents and grandparents. So for me, Tibet had always been the preoccupation of my mind from childhood, and even today I wish that Tibet becomes free and independent, and one day we are able to go back to our own country.
Okay, but your activities, what do you do more than speaking? Also, have you a group? Are you a representative of a group, or just of yourself as a Tibetan?
Well, I am a member of Tibetan Youth Congress, which is perhaps the biggest non-governmental organizations of the Tibetans in India and also around the world. But I, as an activist and also as a writer, I work quite independently. My writing, particularly, I write poetry and stories. I have a book of poems that I carry with me, and I do speaking tours all across India, talk about Tibet by reading poetry and telling Tibet stories and gathering people's imagination of Tibet, and also the interest of India's in the issue of Tibet's independence, and how it is so important for India's long-term interest in the independence of Tibet. Only then India can truly be peaceful and united. Otherwise there is always a China danger from China. So you see, I do these kind of activities on the outside, but most importantly my work is within the Tibetan community to keep the spirit of the Tibetan freedom movement alive by intellectually awakening the Tibetan community.
There are quite a lot of Tibetan refugees still in India.
Well, outside...
Or what do you mean by Tibetan community? Do you mean the Tibetan community in India?
Yes, yes. So you see, outside Tibet, in India, Nepal, Bhutan, Europe, America, all put together, we are looking at 150,000 Tibetans. And this is the Tibetan community in exile, outside Tibet. Out of that, almost about 80 to 90,000 Tibetans live in India, in different other refugee camps. And these are independent Tibetan settlements where there are Tibetan farmers, and also Tibetan go into sweater business, and also restaurants and cafes and these kind of businesses.
We saw the temples also. That
you'd been,
when we were in India.
So you'd been to some of these.
We saw yes, we worked around.
So I say Tibetan refugee because in India, whether it's my parents' generation who came from Tibet or people like me born in India, we are still not citizens of India, and we are not citizens of any country. In fact, we are stateless, and therefore we are refugees living in India, hoping that one day we will be able to go back to our own country. Therefore, we cannot vote in India, we cannot participate in any of the facilities meant for citizens in India. We cannot own properties in India. So you see, but our idea of being in Tibet, being in India, is to return and not to settle down or not to fight for local rights. you see. So therefore we call ourselves refugees.
What would happen if you went to the border of Tibet and said that I'm Tibetan, I want to go to my country?
Well, we tried that a number of
tried
times,
that, yeah.
and I myself, when I was 22, after my graduation, after my college education, I went to Tibet from Ladakh borders secretly, sneaked into Tibet from the back entry, and went into Tibet. Then I got arrested by Chinese security. They blindfolded me, beat me, interrogated me, and they suspected that I must have been sent by government of India on a spy mission, and they tried to make me confess that, and that interrogation went on for a long time. For 3 months I was in jail, and when they couldn't prove anything against me, they had to throw me out of Tibet. So you see, I had my own stories of that. But as a political action, then later in 2008, for example, we were 400 Tibetans organized in a political march. We tried to cross Tibet and go to India, or cross India to Tibet. That was the time when we faced many difficulties. Firstly, government of India would stop us at the border, not allow us to cross. And secondly, of course, the Chinese would be very alert on the borders, and they would see what they could do. So all these difficulties are there. But of course, these were political actions. We wouldn't know where it was going. We could only project at the same time, do everything possible from our own side.
But the normal way, you can't come into Tibet. Are you a citizen of any country? Are you a citizen of... no, you're not a citizen of India.
I'm not a citizen of any country. Although I'm born in India, we call ourselves refugees, and we hope that we would return someday.
But what about so if you go the normal way, try to get into Tibet, as tourists go to Tibet, why can't
even
you?
for that, you must have a passport on which you should receive Chinese visas. And any Tibetan, whether it's in foreign country, from India, who would have a passport and try to apply for visa, Chinese government would be very skeptical, and they would do everything possible to see if you have any political links they wouldn't want. But in our case, because we are stateless in India, we have no paper on which we could receive visas from China. So that leaves us absolutely no chance for us to go to Tibet.
But you can go to other countries.
Other countries, because we today travel with a travel document issued by the government of India. I'll show you. It's an interesting document. So with this document, then we are able to travel and go if we get the visa from those countries. Yeah.
How is the situation for Tibetans in Tibet now? And I guess there are many you know, I'm sure you know a lot about it, and also there are many different groups. I guess among the Tibetans, I've seen pictures of nomadic people on very high level in Tibet. And do we know anything about those people? Because we have a magazine here about indigenous peoples, and we're interested in people who live in close contact to nature and such things. Do we know about that? Anything?
Why not? Why not?
You know?
Why not?
You know something about their situation now in
Of course.
Tibet? Yeah.
This is what I have been studying and following all my life. Yeah. See, what you're talking about are the Tibetan nomads, and in the Tibetan community, 60 to 70% of Tibetans are nomads, and they live on the pasture land. They graze yaks, sheep, and is the nomadic life they have been living ancestrally for thousands of years. This is one of the last nomadic pastoral life that the world is going to see. All over the world, the nomadic life is coming to an end. And there is tremendous pressure on the Tibetans to change that and settle down in artificial villages. what China is doing is they are coercing Tibetan nomads to give up on their traditional nomadic pastoral life.
They want that.
They want that so that they can capture the land to bomb them and mine, take away natural resources like lithium, gold, copper. Take them to feed the industries in China and make cheap made in China products and sell it to the West. So you see, industrialization at the end of the day is putting that pressure on the land in Tibet. And land in Tibet is not a small country. We are talking about 2.5 million square kilometers of land, which is 1/4 the size of China. China is 9.6 million square kilometers of land. Out of that, 2.5 million square kilometers of land is Tibetan Plateau. Now, Tibetan Plateau is geographically the biggest plateau in the world and the highest plateau. It stands on an average at 4,000 meters above sea level. Untouched virgin land. Tibetan nomads have been rearing their cattle on that grassland. Today, China is forcing Tibetan nomads to give up on that land and settle down in matchbox houses, kind of reservation kind of artificial villages. What it does is, the moment you are able to force a Tibetan nomad, you are left with huge swathes of pasture land. And that's what they do is they commission that to miners, Chinese individual company miners. And these miners, yes, they bomb them and dig mines.
You mean they blow with dynamite or?
Of course, whatever and however they do. I'm sure in Sweden also you may be doing.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is what they're doing, and China has said that they have found the best quality of lithium and highest amount of lithium in Tibet, and lithium goes into making all the batteries. 60 to 70% of batteries around the world are made from China.
So those mines are in action now. There are mines there.
Yes. So the nomadic life that you are talking about are under tremendous pressure. And if that changes, entire Tibet will change forever. And we must know the Tibetan Plateau is the roof of the world. If there is a major climatic change because of industrialization, damming of the rivers, it will change climates around the world.
And what about other Tibetans who are not nomadic?
There are Tibetan farmers, traders, traditional ways of living, and also those who are already assimilated into urban living also. But much of the Tibetans are nomads and farmers.
And what are the political conditions for generally for Tibetans concerning political influence, religion, things like that?
You see, we have to look at Tibet from the history. Today, entire region of 2.5 million square kilometers of land is under Chinese occupation. And when I say occupation, this is exactly what is happening in Ukraine by the Russian invasion. Perhaps even worse. Because when China invaded Tibet in 1949 and 1950, much of the world were unaware. And those who were aware thought that there is a communist revolution which will bring, there was a romantic, idealistic approach to Chinese rise of communism in China. And therefore, people did not support Tibet. And this was happening towards the right after the end of the Second World War, at the time of the United Nations being created. We are talking about 1949 and 1950. And also at the time when Human Rights Commission was created. So that was the time when China invaded Tibet.
Do you mean that Tibet was an independent state before that? Also, because some people say that Tibet has always been a part of
They have
China.
no idea which people. Look at this flag of Tibet.
Mhm.
This flag of Tibet was created in 1916. 1916 was in the middle of First World War. Most of the countries today who are independent, United Nations recognized countries, there are 205. Most of them were under foreign occupation at the time in 1916. We were not only free and independent, we had our own flag. We used to have Tibetan stamps, Tibetan currency. Our borders are clearly demarcated with India and also with China and Mongolia to the north and East Turkestan, the north western part of Tibet. We were that country. And we used to have trade relationships with the British Empire, with British India. There was border demarcations that happened, and that has marked Arunachal Pradesh as a part of India at the time in 1914. You see, that was the condition of Tibet. Of course, many of the Western countries remain ignorant about it, and today, for Western countries' business interests with China, most of the Western countries are agreeing to policies devised by China where the narrative is that Tibet has been a part of China, and that is false. And this is going to affect the Western countries one day when they start to raise issues about East Turkestan, human rights issues, or cultural genocide in Tibet and Mongolia also. Because you had already said, Tibet is a part of China, or many of these occupied countries as part of China.
Mm. And what is your standpoint? As you want Tibet to be totally free as a state like
you
other
see,
states?
we are today in 2020, where there is interdependence.
Mm.
No country is free and independent, isolated from the rest of the world. No country can survive like that. We all work in coordination. And yet these 205 countries are free and independent. We are seeking the right of the Tibetan people, just like how the 205 countries are free, independent and democracy. Same right, nothing more, nothing less.
Mm.
And is it some kind of autonomy inside the Chinese Republic, or is it full UN membership and then a completely independent state that you want to have?
Yes, just as I said now, we are aspiring to create a free and independent Tibet, which is a democracy, which is part of the United Nations, and also have that kind of trade and political links with people around the world.
Including China.
Including China is going to be an important neighbor in our future, because we are already sharing with China one of the longest borders in the East, but only as a respectable neighboring country.
Maybe you know better, but I've heard that the Dalai Lama, he says that maybe we shouldn't have an independent state, maybe we should have autonomy inside China and there will be less trouble. I don't know if...
Well, my perspective, my opinion about the proposal for autonomy is that at a time when the entire world is dependent on trade with China, the minimum support we may be able to get from European Union countries or America or many of those countries is at least to have a dialogue with China or an autonomous arrangement. But I do not think this Xi Jinping led government today or in the past, Hu Jintao or Jiang Zemin, any of these these governments would ever grant any kind of autonomy. all of them are so insecure of their own position within China and their position within the Communist Party of China. You know, the Chinese Communist Party is built on an ultra fanatic nationalism, where you have to project your loyalty to the party so much that you have to consume the propaganda and act upon it. And unless you do this, you do not climb ranks. And that's exactly what Xi Jinping did. And today he is now going to change the bylaws of the Chinese Communist Party and is going to become the president forever. You see, with such kind of leaders, there is neither hope for independence nor for autonomy. So therefore, our ultimate goal, we must not divert from there, which is to create Tibet as a free and independent country, just like any other 205 free and independent countries, and create a democracy. Common aspiration.
In
as
what way?
the rest of the world.
In what way will you work for that? Also, how will it be done?
I think creating democracy within China is an important aspect. At the same time, looking at the constant change of policies with China among the international communities will also bring about an effect or bring about opportunities for us to assert our aspiration. But most importantly, the Tibetan people, as long as we do not give up and continue to work for a free and independent country and create democracy in our own country, as long as we continue to do that, there is always hope for us.
I don't know if you have opinions of this, but what is the future of the institution of Dalai Lama? Will there be a new Dalai Lama? Do you think that will go on?
Well, as far as the Tibetan people are concerned, this is the 14th Dalai Lama. So the Dalai Lama's leadership, spiritual and political leadership to the Tibetan people is 400 years old. In that way, most of the governments around the world wouldn't have 400 years of continuous leadership. In that way, the Dalai Lama's leadership to the Tibetan people may be a very unique and unprecedented, contiguous leadership. And Tibetan people would want that to continue. And if and when His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama passes away, there will be 15th Dalai Lama. And His Holiness says that as long as the Tibetan people wish, His Holiness would be happy to serve the Tibetan people. And Tibetan people have already said through many of these proceedings, conferences and meetings that we look for 15th Dalai Lama. But His Holiness says, I'm healthy, and let's not talk about future Dalai Lama, let's talk about this Dalai Lama. And he's in the recent times he's been saying, I'm going to live for another 15-20 years. So we'll have to see who would outlast whom, the Dalai Lama or the Chinese Communist Party. But that's the decision from within the Tibetan community. But overall, the future of the Dalai Lama will also have huge impacts in India, in America, and also in Europe. And United States has already passed a resolution supporting the Dalai Lama's proposal for future reincarnation. And I think many of the countries in Europe would also follow suit. These countries would likely to be more confrontational with China, and they would want to make China accountable to human rights violations that they are doing. So of course they would want to support His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Apart from your organization, are there other organizations or political parties among the Tibetans that work with these goals?
Well, you see, overall in Exile Tibetan community, firstly, there is the institution of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which is the overall, the most respected most respected institution, with His Holiness the Dalai Lama himself as a spiritual and political leader of Tibet. But from 2011 onwards, he had devolved his political authority, is now only a spiritual leader. But most Tibetans would continue to look up to him for that kind of guidance. We have Tibetan government in exile, which essentially is government in exile, but we call it Central Tibetan Administration. This is diplomatically worded only to avert any kind of misunderstanding with India as our host, who looks at Tibet as a part of China. And there too, many of the Western countries, including Sweden, who would look at Tibet as a part of China. So we have created capacities to be able to work with many others. So we worded it as toned it down to just Central Tibetan Administration. That takes care of all the 150,000 Tibetans living outside Tibet, and also to work for the aspiration of Tibetan future. Within this democratically elected Tibetan government in exile, there are, of course, the three pillars of democracy. We have the legislative, so 45 members of parliament. Then there is the executive, where Sikyong, or the president of the
This is
Tibetan.
in Dharamsala?
This is in Dharamsala, yeah. So we have the legislative assembly. There is also the executive, the cabinet ministers, and also the judiciary, which is the Supreme Justice Commission. All the three pillars of democracy are functional and still there. Underneath that, there are also the independent bodies like the election commissioner or the auditor general. All these are there, and also non-governmental organizations. There are a number of NGOs who serve different other issues within the community. Then there are also the Tibetan community in foreign countries, like in Nepal or here in Europe and America. Wherever the Tibetans are, there are always the Tibetan community. And in that way, this is such a huge community spread around the world, but very united under the leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And of course, there are Tibet supporters. In all the countries, there are always, foreigners who support Tibet, and they themselves have created a small group, and they would advocate for Tibet. Yes.
Okay. Should we finish?
Okay.
Okay.
No?
Yeah. Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.